Today we have a great malicious compliance story following exactly the nurse's orders. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, if you don't like the job, you can just quit. Okay. A bit of context here. I'm originally from Syria, and I spent around 7 to 8 months in Sudan, Africa, and that country being a third world country and super poor, didn't have any good jobs. But at the same time, prices were so cheap that you can live with only around $100 a month. Rent, bills, food, and water. But gasoline was expensive to the point you might need around $50 to $100 just for commuting to work. So it comes to around $200 per month if you're going to work by any kind of transportation. As for jobs, the best you can do without prior experience is either work in a restaurant or a factory for at most $100, which meant you had to be close to the job or get them to cover transportation. So around 5 months ago, I got in contact with a restaurant owner and talked with him about a job offer I saw. The job we talked about was being a warehouse manager for the restaurant. My shift starts at 8 a.m. and ends at 6 p.m., 7 days a week, with only 1 vacation day per month. And I get 1 sandwich per day as lunch and 1 meal per week to take home. I asked about the salary and he said we'll discuss it later. I asked how will I organize the warehouse, and he said you'll provide me with a laptop to work on later. I agreed to work a trial period of a week, and then we'll discuss the salary and see if it works out. First day on the job, he hands me the keys of their warehouse, and when I open it, I find a glorious mess. I asked my coworkers about it and they said, no one has worked as a warehouse manager for the past few months. I go in and start looking at what we have in the warehouse and taking notes. Then I started a new Google account on my phone and made a new Excel sheet on it and sorted everything there. By the end of day 1, I'd went through most of the things in the warehouse and I only have 2 words to describe what I saw there. Holy crap. It was such a mess. The workers didn't even know what they have in that warehouse. I.e., they need mustard and they don't find it the moment they look at the shelves. They buy a new box. And I can say for sure the warehouse was left like this for more than a year because I found meat in the freezer that was expired since more than 2 years ago. I'm never gonna eat anything with meat in it from that restaurant. Second day on the job, I started actually doing my job by ordering new supplies, sorting the list I made on my phone by type so we can find the items in it quickly, putting away the expired products, etc. During my second day and out of nowhere, the boss comes to the warehouse and gives me a list of everyone in the restaurant and tells me to take their attendance because the guy responsible for this is busy with other things in the kitchen. I tell him I still don't know anyone in the restaurant, but he insists that I can just learn their names while doing my job. Okay, whatever. I'm trying to impress him the first few days, so I'll do it. By the end of day 2, I had finished inputting everything into my phone, throwing away all expired ingredients and even taking attendance. All that's left is physically sorting out the warehouse to make it look better, and I'll have done a great job and was hoping for a good answer from the boss. I go to discuss things with him at the end of my shift. I show him how I sorted everything on my phone and tell him that once he brings over a laptop, we can just move the file there and it's easy for anyone to check the inventory since it's on Google and all that stuff. Then I explained to him the state of the warehouse when I came and how much I worked to make it better, and he was really impressed and praised me for a job well done. Then I asked how much my salary will be. He said, your salary will start at $60, and then as you work I'll improve it, and maybe in a few months you'll reach $120. I said, what? I can't even afford to stay alive until then. Transportation between here and my house alone are $50. Are you telling me not to eat or pay rent during this month? At least, he cuts me off with an angry voice. If you don't like it, then you can just leave. I figured that he wasn't someone to be reasoned with, so I immediately answered, okay, and left. Bullet successfully dodged. The next day, one of the coworkers there calls me asking where I keep the list of their inventory because he didn't find it, and I answered that there is no list. He was surprised and asked about the list I showed the boss, and I said, oh, that. It was actually on my phone, and he asked me to send it to him, which I reply with, I'm sorry, but since I quit, I just removed the file from my phone. Have fun sorting through that mess, and I hang up. It wasn't that big of a victory, but at least I didn't give them the results of my efforts for free, because it happened like that my 2 days of work there were unpaid. Edit 1. Some people are showing concern for me in the comment section, and I'm very thankful to you guys. Don't worry though, about a month ago I moved from Sudan to Erbil in Iraq, and a week ago I found a good job, which gets me a good enough salary to cover my expenses here and have some money left. 2. Some people in the comment section are getting angry I called Sudan a third world country. Now, let me be clear about this. Me being from Syria, I never thought my country was better than Sudan. I consider Syria to be heck on earth. If you can beat being wanted by the military and having to sneak away from them whenever you see them, having an AK-47 pointed at your head, waking up to the sounds of air raids from your own military on your city, and a mortar shell landing less than 30 meters away from you, then I will admit your country is worse than mine. When I say a third world country, I mean a crap hole like what most people in the third world countries mean when they call their countries as such. So stop being butthurt about something that doesn't concern you. I can call my country whatever I want, and I know Sudani people who call their country as third world too. Consider it the same as the N-word. Me being a third world resident get to call all similar countries as third world countries. OP really went in there on their life experiences there at the end. Back to the malicious compliance though. I love and fully support exactly what OP did here. If you're doing this invaluable work for the company and showing that you are going to bend over backwards for them, and they respond to that with the slightest indication that they might undercut your pay or make it hard for you to even survive, 100% the go-to should be explain that you deserve a living wage, and if they don't budge, you get out of there ASAP and find someplace that will respect your efforts. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, I worked ahead of schedule, but I guess I don't work for you anymore. This is a story one of my coworkers told me while we were chatting in the lab. He's a recent hire after getting laid off from one of the big 3 car companies. An unfortunate, very common history for someone to have in my area. However, he was cheered up immensely because of how badly they'd screwed themselves by letting him go. He told me how the company had him specialize in a very technical software project, being the only guy who knew how to use the requisite tools and being the de facto expert on how the code was structured and how it worked. No one else felt the need to get up to speed or brush up on it because he handled it all. He had so much free time being put on no other assignments that he ended up working way ahead of schedule and finishing not only the software, but the security audits, reports, and all sorts of documentation that would have been necessary once the project was finalized. He kept these pre-produced deliverables on his personal directory so that he could have them ready in a flash when the company asked for them. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Well, a car company's favorite pastime is layoffs, and they decided he was no longer necessary and canned him. In retrospect, their unwillingness to get him started on any other project was a red flag. Knowing exactly what kind of hot water they'd be in without him, he happily deactivated his employee account and subsequently deleted everything on his personal drive. The remaining project team members rapidly discovered how screwed they were when they tried to provide a status on his software and realized none of them knew anything about how it worked, how finished it was, or how to continue working on it. No one had bothered to have it explained while he was still there. One of his buddies on the team called him up a few days later, begging him to help him out and just let them have the files he'd completed ahead of time. My coworker felt conflicted because he had no real grudge against the employees who were stuck in the situation, but obviously no one had those files anymore since he was no longer an employee. He basically told his friend that the company had dug its own grave and he couldn't help in any way besides giving him some tips off the top of his head from what he remembered. He told me he somewhat regretted helping them out on his own time, but ultimately just hoped management learned their lesson. And because I've read similar stories on this sub, I told him, that's when you call back and give them your quote for freelance work. Literally every time a malicious compliance story comes along where people ended with quoting their freelance work rates, it is fantastic. This company just screwed you over and shot you out of a cannon and then wants to come crawling back to you begging. Well, they can pay 10 times what they paid you before. Ideally, they decline and you don't have to work for their ungrateful butts again. But if you do, at least you're getting paid something that's worth it. Our next story is, any number divided by itself always equals 1, including 0? Okay then. The recent post on mathematical rigor reminded me of this brief moment of pre-consciousness for my schooling. This was in the UK quite a while back now. The cast is me and the teacher. Not a bad guy really, just tired of dealing with a class full of rowdy teenage boys. I'd been given a scholarship to a very accomplished private school and had just joined. Starting year 9, around 13 years old, equivalent to 8th grade in America. This school, as was common, had top, middle, and bottom seats for teaching maths. Now, I was brilliant, especially in maths, but bored out of my mind in all my previous schools because they taught so much slower than what I was capable of. This new school decided I was a bit behind in my maths knowledge, and so put me in middle set. Our first lesson was long division. Towards the end of the lesson, we get the following exchange. Teacher said, "Any number divided by itself equals 1. I said, "But sir, what about 0 divided by 0? They said, "Yes, including 0. I said, "I really don't think that's right. And then I get cut off and told to stop interrupting the lesson, which ticked me off. So I hatched a plan to prove my point. We get handed homework, which was just a list of 20 long division questions to answer. Cue the malicious compliance. That evening I wrote the following at the top of my homework. Teacher insisted in class today that 0 divided by 0 equals 1. Following that, it must be true that 2 times 0 divided by 0 equals 2 times 1. Hence, 0 divided by 0 equals 2. But we know 0 over 0 equals 1, so 1 equals 2, and 0 equals 1. And hence, 0 equals 1 times any other number as well. And then I wrote 0 as the answer to all my questions, and gave it in at the next lesson. The following morning, I get called into a meeting with the head of the maths department, who hands back my homework with full marks and tells me that I'm being moved to top set maths with immediate effect. Teacher probably didn't get in much trouble for it, and he and I never had a lesson together for the 5 years I was there, but I'd like to think he's never forgotten me. I love that OP, although their math was wrong, showed their work there by what they were taught, and clearly the head of the maths department was so taken back by it, so moved by it, that they're like, this guy has to go to the top right away. I can just imagine a cinematic scene where they pull their glasses off their face holding the paper up, mouth open, hand kinda shaking a little bit. They take it and bolt out of their office and they're full on sprinting over to the admissions desk, pounding on the desk saying, "We've got to put this kid in top set immediately." Our next story is, since there's nothing wrong with it, you can buy it. My SUV was throwing error codes, so we took it to the dealership to have them look at it. They informed us that the computer just needed a reset and everything was good. We didn't believe them, so when we went to pick it up, my husband drove it around the parking lot, and just as we suspected, it was driving awful and now making a horrible noise. So we went back inside and told them they're wrong and to fix it properly. Several days later, they called us back to say that they figured it out and it was definitely fixed now, something to do with the transfer case. And a $2,000 bill later, we're told it's fixed and we won't have any further issues. Great, I drive it away and I get error codes again. By this point, we're beyond frustrated because this vehicle just keeps costing us money and is being nothing but issues for the past year or so. So we take it to the dealership and tell them we'd like to sell it. The lady evaluating it asks us if there's anything wrong with it, and I inform her that I just picked it up from your service department earlier today, and they told us that it works perfectly. She takes the keys and goes out to look at it, comes back in and asks about flashing lights and some weird things. We agree with her and let her in on the story. We walk over to the service desk and inform them that their sales department won't buy it because there's something wrong with it. So why does the service department keep telling us that there's nothing wrong with it? He went so red and immediately went to speak with his manager. They ended up having to call the vehicle engineers to figure out how to fix it, and we only had to pay costs on the part that apparently would actually fix it. It was something to do with a computer, something that needs replacing after the transfer case goes. I can't say for certain if it was finally fixed or not, because the day I picked it up, I traded it in for a different make. Honestly, hearing this story doesn't surprise me as we continue to move forward and forward into having more gadgets and technology in cars. Having some kind of indescribable computer something that needs replacing is kind of just the new norm, I think, in vehicles. Shoot, it seems to be the new norm in like refrigerators. Why does my washer dryer have to connect to the Wi-Fi and have Bluetooth? Why do I have to download an app to wash my clothes and scan the QR code that pops up on a screen? And don't even get me started on TVs. Let's try and find a dumb TV anymore. Doesn't exist except for retail purposes. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.